Hello, good evening, and welcome to my live painting demo this Tuesday night. I am doing a painting of Julia Ramuz, Ramuzo. See if I can say her name right. Uh, Ramu, Ramuzova. Well, I was saying it right earlier today, but you're just going to have to forgive me. Um, yes, sorry, Razumova. And she is an artist. I first found her work on Sketchy, and she is a digital portrait artist. I wouldn't say portrait artist. She does sort of more like caric, not caricatures, but um, caric- more like stylized faces, I guess you would say, highly stylized faces. And posting Instagram about the sailor. Her Instagram count now is almost 800,000 followers, so she's really blown up. Her account's blown up in the last few years. Anyway, I'm going to get started painting. This is was again a selection from my followers, a choice of a few different photos, and this is the one that was chosen. I think a little bit because it's a little bit unusual, the lighting, and I think people wanted me to take a stab at um, kind of a different lighting setup. Starting to try to get these measurements right in the hand. Just sort of roughing it in, just trying to get an idea first of where kind of where things fall on this. I'm working on a 9 by 12 board. These are Speedball Mona Lisa panels, art gessoed art panels that I have actually applied an extra coat of gesso because they're a little bit too slick generally for oil painting on. I know one artist that she likes them slick. She's just got used to working on them that way. But I found it completely frustrating that every time you put down a brushstroke, you would be picking up more paint than you actually put down. So the intriguing thing about this photo is that it's an extreme lighting. The shadow is I've actually pulled a little bit of light out of the shadow by playing with it in Photoshop, but the shadow goes very dark, and then the light side of the face is very light. And again, in Photoshop, I did pull out a little bit more information, so I had a little bit more to work with. But it just makes sort of the some of the warm tones in her face and the cool lighting almost it's almost a study in white. And so that does make it a little bit tougher to paint because you really do have to control your values quite a bit. I see. Oh, is my oh my um, I have the feed up on my monitor, and I can see that it's lagging quite a bit. I'm getting a loader spinning. I just think I have poor quality internet, even though it's supposed to be high speed. But um, when you have a couple boys gaming and a few, 7 or 8 devices on the same network, then it gets to be a little bit tougher. Anyway, um, I hope that you guys aren't losing connection. I see that Austin is here. He says, oh, he's watching from England, so it's a late night for you, I guess. And Sankit, have you ever been accidentally drop paint over your computer display? Well, there's a little bit of splatters on there. I don't try not to worry about it too much. And Sankit, if you can tell me where you're watching from, I'm just curious to know. And we have Ozio Maz watching from Port Harcourt, Nigeria. First time joining live. Oh, so it might even be pretty early in the morning in Nigeria. I'm not sure if Nigeria is Greenwich Mean Time or close to that. So I guess that would probably be about a 5 or 6 hour difference. So that would be like 3 in the morning, something like that. If I wasn't using my phone, I'd ask Siri what time it was in Nigeria. maybe I need to refresh my screen here so it's just, okay, that's a little bit better. How yellow the display is. Let me turn off. Just give me a second. I've just turned off the overhead light in my studio. It is a warm light, so it can make um, the overall cast of the panel look yellow. It still looks a little bit yellow actually, but not quite as much. So hopefully that improved it a little bit. Um, Need to start measuring a little bit. My rough drawing looks quite a bit off. Yep. So the base of the nose is actually a little bit higher, something like that. And let's see where the edge is. The edge of the nose is there. Okay, let's try that again. So something like that. The line of the bridge of her nose is about there. That would put her thumb over just a little bit further. Okay, got to do a lot of measuring now to make up for the fact that I hadn't been doing it. Okay, I need a little bit of gray here. There we go. So if the thumb is about there, then the eyebrow coming across. Let's get the height of that eyebrow. Okay. That comes to about there, according to my measurements. And then the ear, warm pink color. So my naphtha red with titanium white will kind of give me the right, get me in the right direction. Something like that. Yep. From the top. Okay, and Sanket is watching from India. Namaste. And it's 3 a.m. in Nigeria. And Jack is here from South Carolina. Welcome. Okay, made her ear a little bit too long. Okay, so if her nose is here, sort of, something like that, that eye is going to be higher. Something like that. Okay, and so then the jawline has to be not where I drew it. Lips are fairly close to the base of her nose. And we see more of her lower lip than her upper lip, just a little bit. Okay, and then her jaw is coming somewhere around here. Neck sweeping down, and then all of this side of the neck is in shadow somewhere. Okay, so I have lots of lines down that are a little bit distracting, so I need to start that I want to keep. So I'm just going to come in with my shadow. I'm going to start off pretty dark. Just see if I can find um, that line in between the shadow and the light. Let's come in with the alizarin permanent on her lips to get some of that red going. lip 2, we have the shadow line somewhere around there. And then we have a shadow on her chin. That's a little bit softer transition on her chin. Very cool. I'm just going to throw a bit of blue in there. And then a little bit of white. Okay, something like that. And then I can make out her cheek line in the shadow. I lined it up enough that I could see the reflected light into it. Kind of like the fill lighting of photography. Okay. Great. This looks horrible so far, but it'll get there eventually. And I want to keep the light into her face fairly cool. And I'm going to add just a hint of blue, the phthalo blue. That's a little bit too much. I would have to overcome that quite a bit. I'm just going to put down a little bit of that just to start with, just to kind of force me to make it a little bluer. But I'm going to paint a lot of white on top of that. So, pink color in it, even pinker. Too dark. And then we get into the cooler range. Okay, let's keep the values closer to being correct, or else this is going to turn out to be a mess. Your colors can always be off. Doesn't necessarily ruin a painting, but your value structure being off, then you start to lose the ability to create the sense of volume and the three-dimensionality of it. So I am really focused in on maintaining that value structure. Now we do have a shadow. It's a cast shadow coming off her eye because of the angle of that light. It's really coming from the side. Just got a little bit of purple here underneath her eye. Something like that. And then the white of her eye is kind of goes into the blues and purples there. And it's pretty dark. It's actually almost looks darker than parts of the iris, which is catching the light. So that's kind of giving her eye this sort of intriguing look. So Sanket asks, what surface am I using? I mentioned earlier, this is a speedball panel, speedball Mona Lisa panel. It's actually changed a little bit over the years. 10, 20 years ago, but over time they've changed the manufacturing process, and the surface of the panel has gotten a lot more slick. So even though it's a gessoed panel, you really need to gesso it again to get it suitable for oil painting on. And another thing about these panels, they're pretty good quality, but you can buy them. You can buy them at most art supply stores, and they're maybe a little bit less expensive than ampersand line of panels. They have a bunch of different ones. The ones that are good for alla prima painting are or at least I find if you like a smooth panel, are either the gesso board panels or the value series that are smooth. The value series, obviously, as the name implies, is a little bit less expensive. And as I was saying, these Mona Lisa panels, even though they're close to the same price range, generally as the ampersand panels. For some reason on Dick Blick, they're like, they're so inexpensive. I don't know why, but this is the only place I've really seen them on anything close to that price. And so I only buy them on Dick Blick. For an 8 by 10 panel, I think it's $1.30 or something like that. Whereas normally gessoed hardboard panels tend to run anywhere from $5 to $10 for that size. So being able to just pay a little over $1 for the panels is a huge plus for me. Especially, I paint a lot, and I don't want the cost of the panel to be prohibitive. I don't want it to discourage me from that I can keep. Occasionally, when I have a commission and I know a little bit about how the painting's going to be hung, sometimes I'll splurge and get some more expensive painting surface, but it really doesn't make that much difference to the quality of the painting. You do want generally a surface that's archival. You don't want to mess around with something that isn't properly primed or properly sealed or isn't acid free. Or I've done a few portraits on paper, but I don't do that anymore. It's just something that doesn't really won't really hold up that well, I think, over time. So it's just best to make sure that what you're painting on um, is appropriate for the type of painting that you're doing. Okay, adjusting those fingers a little bit. This pinky is over a little bit more. Okay, and I'm just going to throw in some dark in the on her far cheek. It's not completely black, but I can lighten it up in parts. There's actually a little more purple in there too. So when I see if I can adjust that a little and get a little bit of white here. And then there's some blue right there. Okay, well, I've exaggerated the colors there a little bit, but it's going to help me see a little bit what I'm doing. Pull the tip of her nose over a little, and I think the dark is coming up a little bit faster from the bottom. Make sure that I don't over straighten her pose, her angle. Got kind of a darker red going in on the side of the nose there. I'm having trouble mixing that color, but I'll get there. Yeah, that's a little bit too dark, but I will correct that. So her cheeks is a red, again, kind of leaning a little bit warm, but sort of a mixture of there's a warm red and a cool red. And then there's some greens or yellows coming in on certain spots on her face, like underneath the eye. I'm just going to dab a little bit of green there, so when I come over with the white, it will pick it up. Just let the colors mix right on the panel. Now, I don't want to get kind of too rainbowy with the colors, or she'll end up looking a little bit like a clown. Um, okay, there's some questions here. I hadn't been paying attention. So, hello. I can't read your name in Korean, but this is Korea. I'm learning a lot from watching the video. Oh, great. Thanks. Welcome. Austin says, I'm trying to understand how you use a pencil paintbrush effectively to know how to measure out areas. Could you briefly explain how to use them to do so? Um, sure, just real quick. So I'm painting what's called sight size. My reference is the same size as my painting, and I can measure directly on the reference one to one to measure out what's happening in the painting. So if I measure from the cheek to the side here is going to be the same size or a one to one ratio. Then the measuring's a little bit different. Especially if you're painting from life, and let's say the model's a little ways from away from you, but your version of the model in your painting is larger. Then the measuring all has to be relative sizes. So you have to start looking at um, the size of the height of the head compared to the width of the head, for example. So you have to do a measurement of the height, and then if the width is some fraction of that, then or the other way around. So let's say the width of the head is half of the height of the head. So you would measure the width of the head, and then you would take that same measurement and you would click off two widths as the height. And if you use your pencil or a thumb or something to sort of visually measure, you kind of have to hold it straight out, and then you have to mark with your thumb or finger um, how long that distance is. I kind of have to explain it. So with your arms straight out and cocked, then um, you kind of want to keep one eye closed, and then you hold it out, and then you can measure. Okay, so I'm looking at the length of the nose here, and then I can measure that against from the tip of the nose to the chin, for example. And so then I'm looking at those relative heights, and then I can translate that into my painting the same way. And so it's a process like that. I think it's harder than doing site size. I like doing site size, and even if I'm not um, painting at 100% scale, meaning the um, painting, if I'm doing 3/4 size, and I can resize it in Photoshop to be that same size that I'm painting, and then work in the same process that I'm working. Um, I don't know if that really helped explain it, but there is a good video on Proco on YouTube about measuring. He goes through it pretty much in depth about how to measure from a live model. So if that's useful, you can track down that video. Um, Sankito says, it seems that you have mastered painting on the same scale. Have you tried scaling up or down the painting to the reference? I guess I covered that a little bit in my question answer to Austin, um, which I don't tend to do it too much when I'm working from a live model. Then yes, it kind of forces you. It's a little hard to paint site size if you're in a classroom with people all painting the same model. You can't really get close enough to do it. Sagan says, I just love your work. Thank you very much. That's very nice. Austin, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to keep on working here. Usually I'm pretty good at painting and talking at the same time, but I've fallen off a little bit here. So um, let's see if I can get back on track. So I haven't really put any kind of the accent marks around like the eyelids. I'm just going to um, take that in. And you see how I did that? I didn't even have a very thin brush, but I was able to get a very thin line just by having just a tiny little bit of paint on one edge of the brush, and then I could just paint with it that way. Once I've found where the mark is coming out, then I can just drag it along. And that sometimes gives you a little bit than having a tiny little painting as you're dragging the brush across, and you can get a pretty thin line that way. You can do it that way, or you can also do multiple brush strokes where one brush stroke um, covers over part of the previous brush stroke to be able to get a thin line also. Okay, I have the base of her nose. It feels like a little bit too low, or where I have my eye is too high, one or the other. It's probably the eye I had never measured, so yeah, I can see that the eye is, I have it like a whole eyelid too high, so let's see if I can adjust that quickly. Um, I hadn't spent too much time on it, so not feeling too aggrieved that I have to paint it over, but that's okay. And I do have the white of that eye much too light, so let's see if I can darken it up a bit. Let's see, I think it's somewhere around there. Yep. And even though I did that beautiful crease in the eyelid, that's the part that I really do have to do over. So let's see if I can do kind of that same technique. Not quite as artful there, but okay, that's looks like in the right place now. And then I'll obliterate this line from before because that's not where it is really. So it's something more like this. Doesn't look quite. Now knowing that's in the right place, then obviously this eyebrow needs to come down too. Should give that a good measure. So good painting really in a way comes down to, it's a little bit of math, you know. You do your measurements, you do your color mixings, you judge the relative values against the relative values that you see in the reference, you compare, you adjust um, until you work your way to the finished painting. Um, Assuming that what you're after is close, visually close to what's in the reference. In my case, I think I picked the reference material based on my style, so it's usually pretty close to how I want the finished painting to look. I guess I have a certain taste or aesthetic of photographs that kind of lead in a particular direction. Even when I'm doing commissions and I don't have that much control over the photographs, I do end up pushing them a little bit so that they're kind of closer to how I want the painting to look in the end. So just painting the fingers, then I'm going to let me paint some of the negative space, adding just a little bit of the safflower oil to the black here just to make it a little more fluid. Just makes it a little easier to work with. Now I can see, I'll eventually see her hair and the top of her head through this space in the fingers, but I'm just painting just like a transparent black to begin with. Same here. Spread this a little. Okay. Okay, let me see. No new questions. Okay, so I'll just keep on painting here. The black really doesn't extend that far, so I'm going to have to change colors if I want to continue silhouetting the fingers. Just a little more of a wash of the black. Again, a little bit of, or a lot of safflower oil here. That'll make the paint a little bit shinier too. It won't tend to dry back as much because I have so much oil that I'm mixing in with the paint. This is kind of a gray background. I'll be adjusting that, and their collar here is much darker than the background. this pose. It looks like she is laying in bed, and there's a strong light, probably from a window, and then she's taking a selfie. If I were to sort of reconstruct what's going on in this picture, and so you can see her hair is draped backwards, almost falling against gravity, coming upward of her neck area. So this is kind of a grayish, um, light grayish color in her neck here. Not a lot of color to it, but I would say it's leaning a little bit on the warm side. And then it gets cool as it goes into the light here. Something like that. And then up towards her ear. So Austin says it's on. Good stuff. Okay. Have a good night, Austin. And let's see if I refresh. My screen was lagging a little bit again. Okay. And I have to keep an eye on it because sometimes my feed goes out, and the only way I can tell is if I don't see my reception of the feed actually moving. The ear is going to be pretty pink. I'm just going to do a wash of pink right now, and then I can get a little more specific later. Okay, I think I want a little bit bigger brush. See if I can. Brushes are a little bit disorganized tonight, but maybe this one will do for now. Want to make sure I get a little bit of yellow in the face. Yellow is my weakness because it's just a really hard color to control, and so I tend to underutilize it. I'm just going to put down a lot of yellow here in the chin, but then I'm going to cover it over mostly with white. But the fact that I'm putting yellow down will bring out some of that hue underneath. Really have to. Maybe I went too yellow. Yeah, that was very yellow. We get a little more white down here. I use titanium white. I've also used a radiant white as a color by Gamblin Oil Colors. And radiant white is like titanium white, but instead of safflower oil as the binder, it uses, I'm sorry, instead of linseed oil as the binder, it uses safflower oil. Let's see, I went a little bit too, sorry, I lost the connection there for a minute. I didn't lose too many of you in that process, but someday I'll figure out how to fix all my technical issues here. I've tried replacing the router. I'm looking at using a webcam, but it doesn't really give me a good solution for how to bring in audio easily and keep it synced. So I haven't really jumped into that one yet. And so having this kind of spotty internet service stream with my phone is sort of the best I have at the moment. So for that I apologize. Just kind of getting a little indication of the nose, the tip of the nose here. There's a little bit of blue highlight there. To get that to work, I have to get everything else to be a little bit darker. And there's some white coming in on the underside of the nose here, just like that, something like that. Well, that was definitely too dark, that red that I put down, so I'll have to adjust that a bit. Okay, and get a little, extend that pink here to the top side of that nostril. So I'm just exaggerating how dark the tip of the nose is. I may correct that at some point, but I just want the highlight there to pop. So to do that, I have to go just dig a little bit up. Okay, and then we got some lights coming in here too. I'm going to bring down her thumb a little bit. I had it painted just a little bit too high there, which is okay. And then I can see the far side of the nose here. Try to indicate it just subtly. Okay, and I got some light blue here on the far side of the philtrum here. And then a pretty deep red against that on the upper lip. Then let's get that warm red. Okay, good. So, and the only thing, these two values are very close in the upper and lower lip. Um, one's cooler, the other is warmer, and there's just that split inner lip that's really dividing it, and that's almost black. Okay, got something like that. Let's see if I get her lip to turn a little bit, which is going darker than lighter than darker again. And the shadow is also helping the brain understand that it's turning. Okay, something like that. Darker and warmer red right against the shadow there. So just finding those colors and finding the shadow's edge will help um, with it starting to feel like it has volume and that it feels real, like real flesh tones. She does have a lot of makeup on, but you still get a sense of the color of her flesh. So, and the light is shining through her eye. That's what's giving it that sense that it's a little bit luminous. Um, if light comes from one side, one angle, then it shines through the eye um, and then illuminates the opposite part of the iris. So if the light's coming from above, then the bottom part of the eye will be illuminated. If it's coming from one side, then the opposite side then will be illuminated. Oops. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention where I was putting the paintbrush down. So put in a black spot just randomly there. So underneath the eye, there's quite a bit of violet or purple. And can be a little more dramatic with the eyelashes on the one side. The other side, they're kind of getting lost a little bit. Something like that. Let's get. Okay, and then I lost that crease. When I moved the eye, I lost the crease of the eyelid, so I'm going to put that back in carefully. Okay, so that's just a little bit too heavy-handed, but I can trim it a little bit working on the edges of it. Got some blue eyeshadow on her upper lid. And then the white of her eye, I said, was pretty dark blue. It's a little bit. Okay, the connection is pretty stable at the moment. A little bit of pink right here coming across the upper edge of the lower lid. Okay, starting to get some of those harder edges in there that's making the details come forward. Okay, and then this area, the upper brow, I have to make that transition a little bit softer for it to feel like it's curving. So something like that. So I have a lot of very hard transitions in here. They're going to have to become a lot softer. So I'm just wiping a lot of that out, just rubbing white right over it until you kind of see the color that was there, but you're not really seeing the edges quite as much. Let's get some of the light that's hitting the edge of the ear. That's better. And let's reinforce this, the shadow in the ear, which is very red. So, um, Ozima says, "Are you using a round brush for details?" Well, it happens to be a round. Sometimes I use a filbert or a flat, but and I'll use the edge or the corner of it. In this case, yes, this is just a round brush, but I'll just get a little bit of paint on it to get thinner lines. Um, and I think sometimes I don't want to have too much control because um, it goes against the keeping that painting kind of loose. If you have a bigger brush, then that forces you to kind of be a little bit more gestural with the brush strokes. If you have a tiny little brush, then the tendency is to kind of um, take little stabs at it, and then the overall quality of the painting will be kind of tighter, have a tighter feeling to it, and it can look kind of stiff or stale, especially if it's not, if you don't have it, then those tight little brush strokes will feel kind of odd. So, and then I do have to get this cool highlight in right here over on the cheek. And then I have to read, including some of the greens that are coming in here. I need to move the thumb over again a little bit, just so it's sitting on the nose at the right spot. I'm using that as kind of a reference for, so it's best to correct it once I see that it's off. And then here's this fingernail. I said I didn't really like the color too much. It's sort of a tan color, I can decide to paint it some other color like a red or something. And I think actually I'm going to do that. I'm going to change her thumbnail color to make it a bright red. I think overall that will be more interesting in the painting. It's sort of getting lost otherwise. And I need the whites to go very cool around this thumb. Trying to have a bit of the phthalo emerald here. When it's mixed with white, it reads more like a blue than a green, kind of a minty color. Her lip is coming up very high on this side too, so I have to pay attention to that. The angle of her lip changes a lot there, and if I have to be careful not to lose that. Which means we're getting some dark blues coming in over here on this side. And some of those blues over here too. And then we have some white reflecting in her lower chin. And then her neck goes much darker, so we need that to really feel the light hitting that side of the face. Okay, and then I got my black. So let's get this rolling here. Okay, let's get a bigger, cleaner brush for that black. Hopefully I have enough black on hand to do the job here. That's where we want a big brush, not to get too tight with it. Plus the gestural strokes where you can see the brushwork in the dark will add a lot of interest. So at some point we may want a little bit of the panel showing through so that we can really see the brushwork. And I want a little bit of purple in there. Paying attention to the shadow. You get a little bit of that minty color again here in the hairline. But it's not the green I wanted. Okay, so I need to get a lot of white in here. Okay, so then soften up this then we have some sort of textured fabric back here. Can't really pinpoint the color quite yet, but maybe it's got a little bit of red with black. And it's the darkest against the ear. See if we can improve the silhouette of the ear a little. Come back to that later. Something's a little off in the drawing around the ear, but it usually takes me a little while to adjust some of these things till they start to look right. Yep, I think that helped. The ear was partially a little bit too tall. Okay, so I've painted all around the face, so let's get back to the face. Let's take out some of this panel since it's a little distracting for the values. Okay, great. Okay, so close to the right. Some of these highlights, they're white, but they're got a tiny bit of color in them, and I'm seeing that as kind of towards the ultramarine blue. So I'm going to see if I can get that to work. If not, then the phthalo blue has a little bit more intensity, and then I can just shift the color a little bit to get the kind of color intensity that I want. Okay, well, went a little bit too dark and green there, but that is better color than the kind of violet towards the side of bottom of the chin here. So let's get a little bit of purple in there. of reds over here. And I want to make sure the colors I'm putting down here that I'm starting to create a sense of volume, that I'm giving, finding the hollow of the cheek, for example, and really emphasizing that. Get the greens up in here that come into the ear. And I need to make her chin a little bit steeper here. Okay. Okay, I have a question here from Shivani. Says, is the direction of the highlight in your painting according to the turn of that particular area of the head, um, or just patches? So yeah, so the highlights should follow the length of the form, because that's, in a way, that's how that form catches the light. So if I follow that idea, then you get the sense that the form is long and then it's turning right at that point to catch the light. And so that will help, in a sense, create that sense of form. But sometimes it's easy just to paint it where you see, start to refine it so that it does follow the form. If that makes any sense, I don't know. Okay, we got a little bit of oranges and reds up here, very light, too yellow. That's better. And then I need to indicate that there's a little bit of hair there, so we're seeing it as hairline. Otherwise, we're not really telling the viewer too much about what's going on in this area. Okay, I think that's just enough to tell people what it is, that there's a little bit of whips of hair here, and where the cheek turns into the ear. Okay, and I know her lower lip is a lot fuller than what I painted. Something like that. And it comes out here a little bit further. Okay, sorry about that again. My connection went out for the second time. Just trying to make sure that I keep it all as one video. Before, I usually have had to start up a new stream, and that's kind of a hassle, because then when people come to watch later, then there's 2 or 3 videos broken up, and that's not a good experience. Okay, so let's get darker underneath the chin and make her chin a little bit shorter. Got a little bit too much white in there in the paint, and that's dirtying up my dark there. that's better. And correct the nose line a little. Okay, this fingertip is going kind of greenish gray because it's falling too far out of the light to kind of look whitish. And again, we're going to paint the fingernails red, so even though we're seeing the inside of the fingernail, I'm just going to come in with red right along the tip there. Reinforce this red here. Okay, now that where that thumb, the shadow comes across the thumb, it's a pretty hard line, but I have to soften it up a bit so that you're really seeing the how to explain it, the movement of the form, the transition, so that it reads as an object, not just light and shadow, but the edge helps describe the turn of that object. Which is kind of what we're after, so you feel the solidness of that thumb. Then we got a little gray here against the nose. Purple, gray. There we go. Then we get sort of these gray greens in here. as it moves away from the light. Okay, and some more shadows in here. And cool light. And then we got mixtures of warms and cools in the palm of the hand. I'm just going to scrub in some color to begin with. Okay, we can put a little bit of the topography in the hand to start to get a sense of the surface there. Let me see. Jack says, looking fantastic, have to go, night all. Thanks. Well, thank you for stopping in. See you next time. have to move the highlight down on the nose a little. It's sitting just a bit too high, and that's really changing the character of her nose. And then this shape in here has to curve a little bit more. Maybe not quite that much, but it's the right direction. I think that's better. Okay. Okay, this little dark here is very important because it tells us where that far edge of the cheek is. And I need the cheek to feel fairly round. And just going to bring this out a little bit, just very um, faintly, so we just start to get the sense of direction of the form. Same here, need to soften up that edge. And then I need to darken it up a little bit right here. And I can keep on working that back and forth until I start to feel the turning of the form. Get a little, remember how I painted the bottom jaw pretty yellow? Well, I have to come back in with a little bit of blues and purples to get the right values going. Can't have anything quite so yellow down there. highlight or reflection goes, but it can't be that light. It need to darken it up a little bit. That one too. I have to go a little bit lighter against the upper lip here because this edge tends to turn and catches the light. Okay, starting to get some of this to read correctly. Like the tip of her nose is just a little bit too low. So I can trim it just a little bit. James says, do you always paint in silence? No, usually when I'm painting by myself, I have videos on my computer playing, sometimes YouTube, sometimes Netflix. Unfortunately, I can't play them while I'm recording a video because of the copyright issues. Um, I won't be able to monetize my videos later, but sometimes they'll ask you to take something down if it's depends on who has the copyright. So no, I don't usually paint in silence. I like usually something going in the background. Okay, I just have a few edges that are off a little bit, and that's not helping her likeness, which I'd like to try to keep if I can. Um, it's not the most important thing, as long as it's working as a painting. But I'd like to try to be a little more accurate if I can. See if I can get that nostril in the right place. I think that's one of the things that's off a little bit. Okay, and there's just a little bit of grayish color here on the tip of her nose. And we got some blues coming in the corner of the eye. Okay, speaking of that unusual eye, says Randy, good job on that unusual eye. I am going to clean it up just a little bit. tendency to make jawlines not sharp enough. Always have to come back later and do a little bit of correcting, but that's okay. Let's give her nose a little more width. I think that's where I'm losing some of the likeness. Yeah, I think that's right. And then this just turns a little bit sooner right here. That was a disaster. Okay, that's better. Okay, so I can spend forever trying to get this jawline right, but I do think I need to turn to the hand to get that piece of it going. So when I do that, I can, I think by bringing this ear up, let's find where it's about even with this part of the lip right here. That would make the bottom a little bit higher, which may be throwing my jawline off a little bit too. So I'm judging the jawline by the bottom of the ear. If the bottom of the ear is in the wrong place, then that's going to make it very hard to do. way. So I'm almost 2 hours in, which I think actually is pretty good progress. I'm just trying to be careful about some of the subtleties in this painting. So I'm taking my time. Really want to get this feeling of light on the flesh here, and that's kind of being careful with some of my colors. Okay, you guys are welcome to ask questions. Otherwise, I'm gonna just paint quietly. Just trying to find the forms in the hand, make it look believable and in proportion, all that stuff. Um, so Sanket says, you painted all over with a single brush. Don't you get messed up while changing the color? Um, no, not too badly. I do a fair amount of wiping. I have this paper towel that I'm just continually wiping the brush as I change colors. Um, but sometimes I'll just stick with a color for a long time. I know some people change brushes with each color that they paint, and that's a little bit too, um, I don't know, takes me out of my thought too much when I'm changing color so much. So I try not to um, worry about that part, just as long as I'm doing a lot of wiping. Eventually the forms in the hand will start to come together. It's just taking a while. Um, you're going from sort of making marks where shadow lines are to trying to get the forms to turn and pull together. Eventually it'll start to feel a little bit fleshy, but it's just taking a long time to get there. Let's get a little bit more black going here in the background. Jennifer says, "Hi AJ, how often do you have to refresh your GAMSOL? How much do you go through?" Actually, my GAMSOL's pretty dirty. Um, if I remember, I try to pour it out into a jar when I'm done painting and let it filter out the paint, then sifts to the bottom of your jar, and then you can pour off fairly clean Gamsol into your can. My paint cleaning can in this case. For some people, it's a jar or a container, um, and that cleans it each time. But in the wiping process, you even if the Gamsol is not that clean, you can get a fairly clean brush. Um, if you're really trying to nail a color that requires a really clean color mixture, then you may have to do a little bit of extra cleaning, clean out your Gamsol, or pick up a new brush. Um, but it depends. And just working a little bit on the shape of the nose here just to get the likeness right. I don't know why I'm really stuck on trying to get her likeness and it not coming that easily. I suppose if I stand back, I can see probably better where some of the shapes or the forms are off a little bit. And I don't mind using this bigger brush right now. It is kind of helping me be a little bit looser here with the paint and get more of these bigger, softer strokes. Again, I didn't give her enough fullness in her lower lip here. So let's see if I can get it finally. I feel like I'm pulling the upper lip down a little bit too much. So maybe that's where some of the fullness will come in, is right there. That looks better already. And then I need to give her more chin. And I need to punch the rosiness in her cheeks a little. That's going to help me get some of the surface quality in there too. I have a friend who's a pastel artist, and he says, if in doubt, purple, meaning if you're not sure what a color is, but use purple. And I'm seeing a lot of purple in these areas, these gray areas that I'm not sure what the color is, so I'm using his advice here a little bit. So I'm using this bigger brush too to get a little bit of thicker paint in also. That's kind of helping a little bit, helping me find some of these forms. Let's get a little bit of this highlight that's there in the corner of the eye. Okay, well maybe that was a little bit too big a brush to do those last few strokes, but can always fix that. Okay, I made her chin a little bit taller here, but I didn't really continue it into the shadow, so let's fix that. Okay. So at some point I'm going to give up on the likeness and just focus in on what needs to be done to finish the painting. Okay, and here, oh, Taylor says, I'm fascinated by where you placed your camera to get this angle and not have your head smack in the middle. Haha. Well, I think there's just a little bit of distortion that's happening with the camera. That it's you can actually see my head. Um, the panel's facing somewhere in between me and the camera. I would have it facing more towards me if there was no camera. But just um, it's just close enough so that you can actually um, see it like it's almost straight on. Yeah, sometimes when someone does a demo and the camera's too far in angle, that kind of bothers me a little bit. So I try not to do that. Okay, and trying to pull the lips out a little bit further here. Okay, starting to get there slowly. Okay, pull that thumb in a little bit this way. So this shadow isn't quite reading it, and I think part of it is that that outer edge is not soft enough. You can add a little bit of stronger orange color around the edge, but it really needs to feel like it's being cast on that hand, on the palm of the hand. Let's get the line here. Starting slowly to eventually get there. Okay. Are you guys all still with me here? Starting to space out a little bit. Sometimes I'll be working on a painting and I'll get just in this zone where I'm almost feel like I'm partially conscious, and that's where I really start to see things in the painting. And it's kind of like an alternate state of mind. And sometimes I paint a whole painting and I don't really remember that much of what I did because I'm just so kind of in this sort of relaxed state, not really thinking, but more like just um, seeing and doing, and feeling how the painting is. I know that makes no sense, but it's it's when you shift over into the nonverbal part of your brain that's just looking and sensing, and but then when you're all done doing that, it's really hard to remember that much of it because you don't really have the verbal markers to fall back on to know what you were thinking at that moment. I think that kind of makes sense. You don't have the verbal markers. It's like not having language because you're just in a state where you're just so visual. Starting to get the feeling of this hand. It's taking a while. See if we can get some of these color changes in the palm of the hand to start to make it feel like flesh. That's a whole lot of purple there. Need to go darker and more neutral. Maybe a little bluer. Yeah, something like that. Okay, and let's get this highlight on the eyebrow working. Really want it to feel like she has this glistening eyeshadow on or something, or just the way the light is hitting it, and really want it to feel like it's light. Okay, yeah, I feel like that bottom lip is just hanging down pretty low, and that's not looking right. That's about right. Sorry, I had a little bit of a burp there. Okay, let me see. Um, Michael says, stopping by to say hi to everyone while I'm on break. Okay. Hello, Michael, and welcome. So I'm repainting over and over some of these areas, just refining as I go. Um, so it doesn't look like I'm actually painting anything. I'm just sort of spending time where I've already painted. And But sometimes that's what it takes to get a painting where it needs to be, just slowly refining as you go. me see. Boiled says, love the lighting. Thank you, Boiled. Okay, well, we're getting up and around midnight, and I'd like to finish this painting before then, um, for whoever's still with me here. Um, it's not really where I want it to be, but I don't think that I really can afford to keep on painting on this one. So at midnight it will be finished, like it or not. And sometimes that works out better because then you have some of the original fresh brush strokes that you would have painted over if you kept on working on it. Let's see, soften this up just a little bit. getting up along midnight. Like I said, I'm going to try to finish it before then. Okay, just need to get the hand working, and then I think it's done. I've played around enough with the jawline here, although still want to play around with it. it's just a little bit past midnight. I think if I do anything more on the hand, I'll just do it offline. But I think for all intents and purposes, this is done. Um, it looks close to being done. And let me just thin up this pinky a little bit. So let's get the tips of these fingernails. Okay, so I think that's done. That's about as close as I'm going to get without really spending a fair amount of more time on it. Um, so I am just going to sign this somehow, and then I'm going to sign off. Just real quick, while I still have a few of you here, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to my channel, and that way you'll get notifications when I go live or put up other videos. Okay, that's about it. Thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully you guys can come back and watch next week, and look for this when I post it on Instagram.